The Complete Works of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 2, Section 3, Practical Vedanta, Part 3. Lecture delivered in London, 17 November 1896. In the Chandogya Upanishad, we read that the sage called Narada came to another called Sanat Kumar and asked him various questions, of which one was, if religion was the cause of things as they are, and Sanat Kumar led him, as it were, step by step, telling him that there is something higher than the earth, and something higher than that, something higher than that, and so on, till it comes to Akash, that is the ether. Ether is the highest and the light, because in ether are the sun, the moon, the lightning, the stars. In ether we live, in ether we die. Then the question arises, if there is anything higher than that. Sanat Kumar tells him of Pran. This is, is like ether. Sanat Kumar tells him of Pran. This Pran, according to the Vedanta, is the principle of life. It is like ether, an omnipresent principle, and all motion, either in the body or elsewhere, is the work of this Pran. It is greater than Akash, and through it everything lives. Pran is in the mother, Pran is in the father, Pran is in the sister, Pran is in the teacher, Pran is the knower. I will read another passage where Shvetaketu asks his father about the truth, and father teaches him different things and concludes by saying that which is the fine cause in all these things, of it are all these things made. That is all that is true. Thou art that, O Shvetaketu. And then he gives examples. As a bee, O Shvetaketu, gathers honey from different flowers, and as the different honeys do not know that they are from various trees and from various flowers, so all of us, having come to that existence, know not that we have done so. Now, that which is that subtle essence in it, all that exists has itself. It is true. It is a self, and thou, O Shvetaketu, are that. He gives other example of the river running down to the ocean. As a river when they are in the ocean, do not know that they have come from various rivers. Ever so, when we come out of the existence, we do not know that we are that. O Shvetaketu, thou art that. So on he goes with his teachings. Now there are two principles of knowledge. The one principle is that we know by referring the particular to the general and a general to the universe. And the second is that anything of which the explanation is sought is to be explained so far as possible from its own nature. Taking up the first principle, we see that all our knowledge really consists of classifications, goes higher and higher. When something happens singly, we are, as it were, dissatisfied. When it can be shown that the same thing happens again and again, we are satisfied and call it law. When we find that one apple falls, we are dissatisfied. But when we find that all apples falls, we call it the law of gravitation and are satisfied. The fact is that from the particular we deduce the general. When we want to study religion, we should apply this scientific process. The same principle also holds good here, and as a fact we find that that has been the method all through. In reading this book, from which I have been translating to you, the earliest idea that I have trans is this principle of going from the particular to the general. We see how the bright ones become merged into one principle. And likewise, in the ideas of the cosmos, we find the ancient thinkers going higher and higher. From the fine elements, then go to the finer and more embracing elements. And they come they come to one omnipresent ether, and from that even they go to an all embracing force or pran. Through all this runs the principles that one is not separate from the others. It is the very ether that exists in the higher form of pran, or the higher form of pran concrete, so to say, and become ether, and that ether becomes still grosser, and so on. The generalization of the personal God is another case in point. We have seen how this generalization was reached and was called the sum total of all consciousness. But a difficulty arises. It is an incomplete generalization. We take up only one side of the fact of nature and the fact of consciousness, and upon that we generalize, but the other side is left out. So, in the first place, it is a defective generalization. There is another sufficient, and that relates to the second principle. Everything should be explained from its our own nature. There, there may have been people who thought that every apple that fell to the ground was dragged down by a ghost, but the explanation is the law of gravitation. And although we know it is not a perfect explanation, yet it is it is much better than the other, because it is derived from the nature of the little of the things itself, while the other posits an extraneous cause. So throughout is based upon the nature of thing itself is the scientific explanation, and an explanation which brings in the outside agent in unscientific. So, the explanation of the personal God or as a creator of the universe has to stand that test. If that God is outside of the nature, having nothing to do with nature, and this nature is the outcome of the command of that God and produce from nothing, it is very unscientific theory. And this has been the weak point of every theistic religion throughout throughout the ages. These two defects we find in what is generally called the theory of monotheism, the theory of personal God with all qualities of the human being multiplied very much, who by his will created this universe out of the nothing, and yet it separates from it. This leads us into two difficulties. As we have seen, it is not a sufficient generalization, and secondly, it is not an explanation of nature from nature. It holds that the effect is not the cause, and that the cause is entirely separate from the effect. At all human knowledge shows that the effect is but the cause in another form. To this idea, the discoveries of modern science are tending every day. And latest theory that has been accepted on all sides of the theory of evolution, the principle of which is that the effect is but the cause in another form, and readjustment of the cause and the cause readjustment of the cause, and the cause takes the form of the effect. The theory of creation, not the theory of creation out of nothing, would be laughed at by the modern scientist. Now, can religion stand this test? If there be any religious theory which can stand these two tests, they will be acceptable to the modern mind and to the thinking mind. Any other theory which we ask the modern man to believe on the authority of priest or church or books, he is unable to accept, and the result is the hideous mass of unbelief. Even in those in whom there is an external display of belief, in their hearts there is a tremendous amount of unbelief. The rest shrink away from religion, as it were, give it up, regarding it as priestcraft only. Religion has been reduced to a knot of national form. Sort of national form. Okay. Religion has been reduced to a sort of national form. It is one of our very best social remnants, let it remain. But the real necessity which the grandfather of the modern man felt, for it is gone. He no longer finds God. He no longer finds it satisfactory to his reason. The idea of such personal God and such a creation, the idea which is generally known as monotheism in every religion, cannot hold its own any longer. In India, it could not hold it upon because of the Buddhist, and that was the very point where they gained their victory in the ancient times. They showed that if we allow that nature is possessed of infinite power and that nature can work out all its wants, it is simply unnecessary to insist that there is something beside nature. Even the soul is unnecessary. This discussion about substance and qualities is very old, and you will sometimes find that the old superstition lives even in the present days. Most of you have read how during the Middle Age, and I am most of you have read how during the Middle Ages, and I am sorry to say even much later, this was one of the subject of discussion, whether qualities adhered to substance, whether length, breadth, and thickness adhere to a substance which we call dead matter, whether the substance remaining, the qualities are there or not. This our Buddhists say, you have no ground for maintaining the existence of such substance. The qualities are all that exist. You do not see beyond that. This is just the position of the most of the modern agnostics. For it is this fight of the substance and the qualities that, on the higher plane, takes the form of the fight between Numenion and phenomenon. Numenion and phenomenon. There is the phenomenal world, the universe of the continuous change, and there is something behind which does not change. And this duality of existence, that is Numenion and phenomenon, some hold it is true, and other, with better reason, claims that you have no right to admit the two. For what we see, feel, and think is only the phenomena. You have no right to assert there is anything beyond phenomena, and there is no answer to this. The only answer we get is from the monistic theory of the Vedanta. It is true that only one exists, and that one is either phenomenon or neonion. It is not true that there are two, something changing and in it and in and through that, something which does not change, but it is the one and the same thing which appears as changing and which is reality unchangeable. We have come to the think of the body, mind, soul as many, but really there is only one, and that one is appearing in a various forms. That take the well-known illustration of the monist, the rope appearing to be snake. Some people in the dark or through some other cases or some other cause mistaken the rope for the snake. But when knowledge comes, the snake vanishes and it is found to be a rope. By this illustration, we see that when the snake exists in the mind, the rope has vanished, and when the rope exists, the snake has gone. When we see phenomenon and the phenomena only around us, the phenomenon has vanished. But when we see the phenomenon, the unchangeable is naturally follows it naturally follows that the phenomena has vanished. Now we understand better the position of both the realistic and the idealistic. The realistic sees the phenomena only, and the idealistic looks at the phenomenon. For the idealistic, the really genuine idealistic who has truly arrived at the power of perception, whereby he can get away from all ideas of change. For him, the changeful universe has vanished, and he has the right to say it is all delusion. There is no change. The realist, at the same time, looks at the changeful. For him, the unchangeable has vanished, and he has a right to say this is all real. What is the outcome of this philosophy? It is that the idea of the personal God is not sufficient. We have to get to something higher, to the impersonal idea. It is the only logical step that we can take. Not that the personal idea would be destroyed by that. Not that we supply proof that the personal God does not exist, but we must go to the impersonal for the explanation of the personal. And for the impersonal is the much higher generalization than the personal. The impersonal only can be infinite, the personal is limited. Thus, we preserve the personal and do not destroy it. Often, the doubt comes to us that if we arrive at the idea of impersonal God, the personal will be destroyed. If we arrive at the idea of impersonal man, the personal will be lost. But the Vedantic idea is not the destruction of the individual, but it is a real preservation. We cannot prove the individual by any other means but by referring to the universal, by proving that this individual is really the universe. If we think of the individual as separate from everything else in the universe, it cannot stand a minute. Such a thing never existed. Secondly, by the application of the second principle, that the explanation of everything must come out of the nature of the thing, we are led to a still bolder idea and one more difficulty to understand, and one more difficult to understand. It is nothing less than this, and that the personal being, impersonal being, our highest generalization is in ourselves, and we are that. O Shweta Ketu, thou art that. You are that impersonal being, that God for whom you have seen, you have been searching all over the universe, is all the time yourself, not in the personal sense but in the impersonal. The man we know now, the manifested, is personalized, but the reality of this is the impersonal. To understand the personal, we have to refer it to the impersonal. The particular must be referred to the general, and that impersonal is the truth, the self of man. There will be a various questions in connection with this, and I shall try to answer them as we go on. Many difficulties will arise, but first let us clearly understand the position of